Welcome to Don't Fuck This Up, the podcast answering the ultimate question, how the fuck did you land that cool job? I'm your host, Lauren Alvarez. Hi folks, and welcome to episode 11 of Don't Fuck This Up. I'm really excited to share today's show with you because last month I had the total pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Desmond Wilson, aka Dr. Des. He's an internal medicine doctor and the founder of telehealth, a concierge medical practice focusing on men's health and longevity. So Dr. Des, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's really amazing to, have kind of exposure in the healthcare space and talk a lot about the evolution. But before we get into that, I mean, how's it going for you? You've had a pretty wild past 6 months or so, would you say?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Medicine is ever evolving, and humans are eternally perplexing. So
Yeah.
those two together make my job always. It's always going to be interesting.
Because COVID's over, right? No.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
COVID. Yeah. COVID is now. I think of COVID as like a new element on the periodic table. It will be with us forever, and it will. It's there, and it totally has changed the way that I interact with patients, how patients interact with me, how everybody interacts with each other. And it just happens to be a health focused thing, which is so it'll always affect my job, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, were you, I don't mean excited because that's really nihilistic, but were you a little bit like, was there any like excitement that came from kind of living through this time as a medical professional with COVID and kind of seeing everything change in real time? I mean, this was
totally
a global pandemic. I mean, that's first in our lifetime.
Yeah. It was surreal is what I would say.
That's a better word than enjoyable.
Excited. Yeah, excited maybe at some point in there. Obviously, I think for a lot of people, COVID was a mix of many emotions. I think for me, when it initially started, when, we were, there were signals showing us that, oh, this is affecting us. I think one of the first cases in the United States was in San Francisco, which is where I'm based. It was just to see it unravel was unreal. I remember when there were, I work in the outpatient office. I don't work in the hospital, so it's not a lot of like very intense moments, right? There's not a lot of people like running and screaming, so on and so forth. But I remember we got a patient who might have been exposed to somebody in Wuhan, China, because the clinic I was working at the time had a large Chinese population. And people were running every which way,
oh my God,
confused as to what to do with this patient. Like nobody knew what to do. And that was just so surreal. And it really felt like a complete kind of flip on its head of kind of my day-to-day life as a outpatient doctor.
Yeah.
So
it
was
wild.
It was wild. It was just a wild time. Obviously things have calmed down a little bit, but it was a black swan event, as it's been referred to as, because it's like a once in a lifetime thing. And as a physician, where I think physicians are totally pillars in their community, but depending on your community, that pillar might be kind of tiny. And when you live in like a big city where there's a lot of people with big titles and so on and so forth, it's a smaller pillar, I would say, in like San Francisco Bay Area. And then for that to be kind of the focus of the world, we became much more present. And I think people listened to a lot more of what we had to say, So that was an interesting time.
So, being a subject matter expertise, like reference, but then also you're like, well, I've never been through this before. I'm just telling you the best advice I can give you in the moment.
Totally.
And it was
Yeah.
changing week to week. I mean, that was the other thing too.
Yeah.
Not something you learned in school. I mean, nobody learned it in school. Maybe now they're teaching it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what everybody learned was epidemiology, right?
Right.
It was like everybody learned like population health and epidemiology. Like not just doctors, everybody. People knew, still know things that, was 0.01% of maybe most doctors' education in terms of like, how to understand the spread of viruses and how it affects certain populations and not others, and so on and so forth. Everybody became like an expert,
Yeah.
which was cool, but also not cool.
Yeah, because if everyone's an expert, then is anyone an expert? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, talking about school a little bit, like what was medical school like for you? I mean, it's a lot of school, so that's kind of a broad stroke question, but what was it like for you, sort of generally speaking? I mean, and I guess like aside to that is like you went to some really prestigious schools. Aside from Loyola, New Orleans, obviously, Tulane, but then also doing rounds, at Brown and Penn, right? It's a big deal. So talk a little bit about school and what that experience was like.
Yeah. I don't know. I took kind of a weird path to medicine, I think, because my objective in undergraduate was not to be a doctor at all.
What was it?
At least not to be a medical doctor. Dude, I wanted to be a physical anthropologist, those are the people who essentially study bones, right, of past humans of all subtypes. So like that's what I wanted to do.
So you were like hoping to go to the pyramids and like check in on King Tut. You weren't trying to see live patients who are sending you pictures of their dick. On telehealth.
No, I did not. I did not foresee dick pics in my future. Professional dick pics.
Right.
Did not foresee that. No, I wanted to like be digging in the dirt and finding like bones of what humans might have been a million, 2+ million years ago. That was super, super interesting to me. And I was like kind of on that path. I was a double major, so I was also like studying psychology. And so I was going to maybe somehow mix the two. I don't know how that would have worked. But
interviewing the bones to see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I kind of like, the big thing that happened in my life is, my mom died when I was pretty young. I was like 20 years old. And I kind of had a like epiphany of like, just like my gut had kind of always told me to like become a doctor. It was weird. I don't know. There was something about it that I always liked. Kind of like what I was talking about at the top of the, when we started chatting, which is like, it's this, I find humans forever interesting and deep, from psychologically, biologically. And then for me to interact with them on like such a personal level as their physician, where you tell your doctor and your doctors see things that literally no one else will ever see or know. I've always kind of liked that relationship. And so then when my mom died, I kind of just had this like, fuck it. Like life is short. I want to do what I have kind of had in my gut, or as a gut instinct for, since I was a little kid. Sadly, a big influence on me was Ben Carson. People don't realize he was like a world-renowned, extremely talented neurosurgeon who went to the University of Michigan, which was in the town that I grew up in, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So when I was a little kid, he was like a big influence on me. Obviously, he's gone down a path that I don't want to talk about. But so I had that moment. I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a doctor. And so then I started doing like pre-med and had a ton of coursework, and ended up going to medical school at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was cool. It was really interesting. It was a great group of people who were not necessarily intense, which is what I was worried about. I was worried people were going to be, because I'm not an intense person. I was worried that, a bunch of people who want to be doctors are, they all seem like, type A psychos, and that's not what it was. It was very relaxed people who had a lot of life experience, who didn't just take the straight path. Because I did take some time off between undergrad and med school. And
it's a lot of school, understandably so, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ton of school. So that was a fantastic experience. One thing that I noted there and has followed me ever since, and if you take a 50-foot view of medicine in general, is I was like, I'm the only Black male in my entire class. Like, I'm like the only Black. I'm like one of maybe 3 Black males in this entire school of 1,200 medical students, which was maybe more specific to that school. But in general, we just know that there's just not a lot of Black people of color going into medicine. So it's actually funny. Quick aside. So I was in medical school from 2009 until 2013. Okay. That was 10 years ago. I just found out that they're using a photo of me still on their website to attract students.
Is this
right?
tokenism? Do you feel that you've been tokenized?
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I'm like, also like, where are my residuals? Like,
right. Can you invoice them? Let's invoice them. Let's send them this podcast and we'll send them an invoice. It'll be great.
I feel like I should be able to. Like, let me get some of that sweet, sweet private medical school money.
Hell yeah.
Tuition money. But even when I was doing that campaign, it was like a PR thing. I was like, this is weird. Like, why are they using me for not just their medical school, but for the entire, because Thomas Jefferson is there's a nursing school. There's I think there's a PA school. There's a lot of other health sciences that they have there, and they were using my image for all of them. So me.
You should have also gotten all those degrees. I mean, they should just give them to you, right?
I should have. Anyways, so that was my first vantage into that, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you saw a lot of representation, but it sounds like definitely not. I mean, how did that wear on you? Because I think even that's something I've encountered in companies when I'm interviewing, and I'm like, wow, I've had 6 interviews and they're all white men. And aren't there any women that work at this company? Are there any people of any background besides white guy? And I think seeing that in mentors or other people that you're working closely with, whether that's school or rotations or even in office, I mean, not seeing that, did that motivate you more to be that representation, or did you start to just kind of not pay it mind? Is that possible?
No, I totally did. And it's kind of, yes. And it's pushed, it's that idea of being representation is still a part of my identity in some of the other projects I'm doing right now. I'm working with a startup that is specifically for people and people of color. I'm one of their medical directors, but we can talk about that later. But so I wanted to, at that time, I was like, okay, this is crazy. I need to be more representative. And so, which is a double-edged sword, by the way, because of the tokenism thing. It's why should I have to be, I've always had this problem, internally, why should I have to put myself forward? This shouldn't be my job. This should be the job of the institution to attract more, I'll just say Black, but attract more Black students. It shouldn't be me that's doing this. But it does feel like I have a duty to do so, right? It's just an internal thing. I think I probably get it from, I don't know, my parents / the town I grew up in. It was I need to represent so that people know that, hey, this is not abnormal. Because what would happen is back then I would work on our, we had interview / admission days. And I was one of the students who ran the day. And so when we would interview Black students, they would come up to me afterwards like, wow, it's like so cool to see like that you're here, that you are doing this and so on and so forth. So that was really important to me. Um,
But there's
and
also like a tax on top of that of you
mm,
doing the work and doing the schoolwork and doing,
mhm,
there's a burden of that, that comes
totally
along with it, right?
1,000%. And
And
it's
no
like,
royalties, we learned.
and no royalties, man. I mean, I feel like I should be striking with the actors and the writers.
Come on out
Strike.
to LA. Let's go.
Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, totally. It's like a mental tax that is always present. I mean, that's not just in medicine, but just being a black person in America. But yeah, it was tough, but also like I I was surrounded. I had a very good group of like friends and my wife when I lived there, so I was very like healthy mentally, I would say. But certainly it's like such an ever apparent thing that has followed me every step of the way. From medical school to residency, where again there just were not a lot of black people or other minorities represented in at that time. And what's always interesting to me is like I did my medical school and my residency in Philadelphia, which is like 50% black or pretty close to. I don't know what the demographic is anymore, but and so it was just weird that in Philly of all places, like they didn't. It was not as representative of who's taking care of the patients. Because when you're a medical student, especially when you're a resident, you are often like the team that's taking care of these patients. Like, yes, you have an attending, but you are interacting with the patients way more than the attending might be. At least in internal medicine, which is what I trained in. So, yeah, so it's the journey through medicine, and the entire training process is, it's it's been interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you come across like you're very cool. I mean, like I'll say for being a
Well,
doctor, I
thank
feel
you.
like, I mean, yeah, but like you've got great style, you have good taste in music, you DJ, you've got like a whole vibe outside of like your professional persona. Have you found this to ever be like annoying to be perceived as like the cool doctor or like this way, or do you find, or is it just me? Am I your number one fan? Yeah.
Fan club of
Yeah.
one. No. I think that there are other physicians who are kind of, they have other interests outside of just medicine, and kind of wear it on their sleeve. And I don't know, you just kind of, you find those people. I personally just do me. I've
Yeah.
always just done me. Like,
Yeah.
I've never tried to be somebody I'm not,
Thank goodness. Yeah.
like I don't try to be like the, intense, like serious, academician kind of doctor. Like, I'm just
Right.
not that person. And I have a lot of other interests, and I tend to those interests. Otherwise, I would go crazy. I don't think it turns people off. I mean, my patients kind of know, but don't know like other stuff that I do unless
They
I
don't know
bring
how
it
cool
up.
you are. Should we like try to plug?
No,
Yeah. Like what's
no.
happening? Yeah.
Yeah, dear patient,
Yeah.
I am so
check
cool.
check
You have
out
no
my
idea.
ladest playlist. Yeah.
Yeah,
Would you like to
right.
vibe during your appointment? Yeah.
Yeah, no, they do not know that I DJ. I don't bring it up
I just
regularly.
outed you on the podcast. Now you're screwed. Everyone's
Well,
going to come in requesting the hot list for the fall.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think, yeah.
I brought it up like occasionally with like, this is kind of embarrassing. I don't need to do this, but I'll bring it up with like my quote unquote younger patients, like the Gen Zers.
Yeah.
They're like in their 20s. I'll like drop something just so they know like
that you're
I'm
cool.
a DJ.
That you're not like, a boomer.
That I'm not a boomer, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. I don't feel like I don't care.
Honestly, like trying to impress Gen Z, like They make me feel so uncool. Like if I'm
Yeah.
walking around in LA, like I immediately
Uh-huh.
feel self-conscious. I'm like, oh, look how cool
Yeah.
they are. I'm
Hmm.
not that cool. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty confident.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think it's a natural thing that people do as they get older. Maybe I'm wrong
We're
about this.
getting old. Okay.
I know, man. I'm like knocking on 40's door, so it's like I feel like I naturally want people to not assume that I'm like their parent.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're like, I'm not a regular doctor. I'm a cool doctor.
Yeah, I'm a cool doctor,
I'm a
right?
cool doctor. You can trust me. They're like, what? Where
Yeah,
can I
they're like,
do
I just
that?
want to know why
I
I have
just,
diarrhea. I don't care about. They're like, oh, cool, you have an Ice Spice tattoo. I don't care.
wait,
Fix
do you?
this. No,
Okay, I was like,
God,
gosh, wow, I didn't know what I was getting into today. We're really just uncovering all the
no,
truths.
not Ice Spice. I do have a Prince tattoo though.
I mean, that seems spot on. And if I remember correctly, your kid was Prince for Halloween one year, is that right?
He was me and him and my wife. We were all raspberry beret.
A trio
We
of
were an
princes.
interpretation. Yeah,
I
it was
love
fun.
it. That's
Yep.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that like an improper assumption I probably had about being an internal medicine doctor is that like you finish school, you just like work in a hospital, everything's like good to go. It's like you're just kind of set. And then like
Hmm.
similarly, people make assumptions about people who are successful in their pursuits or their fields, assuming everything's like handed to them. It
Yeah.
seems like from what you just described, that's really not the case. How does that kind
No.
of assumption and commentary make you feel, when people maybe assume that it's like easy, it's a path that's easy?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is regularly, at least once or twice a year, you see a headline, and doesn't matter where it is, New York Times or whatever your source of news is. You see a headline about burnout, or you see a headline about suicide rates among physicians. That tells you everything right there, right? Um, Not that everybody's burned out, and certainly not that everybody is depressed or depressed to the point where they are suicidal or committing suicide. But what it tells you is that like being a physician is not an easy. It's certainly not an easy path, and it's certainly not an easy job, because like the reward of being a doctor, or at least for me, not for everybody, it is patient interaction. It's improving people's lives. And that's a very broad statement, but I'll just leave that there. And if you want to, go a little deeper there, we can. But ultimately, improving people's lives. And sometimes it's hard to accomplish that goal when you are bombarded by the many things that come with being a physician, whether it's the hours that you work, the amount of patients that you see, dealing with third-party payers slash insurance companies, all of these things, or a pandemic, all of these things are can really kind of whittle you down, right? Like
Yeah.
to a nub that is non-existent. And so it can be very difficult for doctors, just in terms of living a fulfilled, happy life. It really can be.
Yeah.
And so I think what people assume with doctors, and this is, there's a Washington Post article came out about a week and a half ago. And the title is "The Average Doctor in the U.S. Makes $350,000 a year." Why? That's the
Wait,
title.
why is at the end of the title?
Yeah,
Oh no.
$350,000 a year. Semicolon. Why?
Oh no. I
Which is
mean,
like so rude.
it's so
Like,
devaluing. Like, what the
oh,
fuck
it's
is
like
that?
it's insane. Like, so and so there is, amongst, I guess, certain parts of the population, I have no idea, where people think that doctors have it all, that they're set, and it's just like that's not the case at all, right? Like even if you were this average of $350,000 a year is it's not a sorry, it's not a median. It's kind of like it includes the absolute highest paid physicians who often don't even work in clinical medicine anymore. Like they're doing something kind of on in other realms, in business, pharma, whatever it might be. Um, and it doesn't apply to a large swath of physicians who just don't make that much money. But regardless of the dollar amount, um, it's as you said, it's devaluing. It's like let's take away how much we're making. Like maybe focus on not making us feel like we are not worthy of a salary that's been determined by society, the powers that be, right? Like why should we have to feel like people are judging us for the work that we do when I feel like the work we do is pretty valuable? And I
Yeah.
feel like if you take physicians out of the equation of community, there would be it would be a pretty functionless community. It'd be pretty difficult for things to go along at status quo. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd say, I mean, and it's like, it's not like, I think this is my issue with that kind of statement. And, you hear it with other jobs too, is it's like, and then look at, and I haven't read the article that you're citing and I would love to read it. But, it's like, they're like, well, look at teachers. They're so underpaid. It's not take from one to pay the other. It's actually like
Mm-hmm.
use this as a model and elevate pay ranges for
Mm-hmm.
different industries. It's like the cost of living is not going down. The
Mm-hmm.
housing market is chaotic at best.
Mm-hmm.
And also like we're still economically, we're still recovering from, the global pandemic, which really changed the landscape of how people spend, things like that. But
Yeah.
medical doctors were there through all of it. So it's like, why should you be,
Yeah.
I'll say punished, or criticized?
Or criticized. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that people tag so much importance to salary
Yeah.
that they lose sight of what a doctor might be doing. And I'm not saying this as if doctors are the most important people in the community. I mean, people play different roles, right? It's like you can't say the fireman is more important than the doctor, who's more important than the teacher or whatever. But it's like it's just focusing on that does not take into account all the other things that go into the calculus of being a physician.
Yeah. And I think something we were talking about, like even before we started recording a little bit was, around like the desire to make money, and it's not that that's like your only motivation, but I mean, I can say like I'm personally financially motivated. Definitely. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a good thing to admit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we shouldn't be ashamed of that. But,
Mm-hmm.
also knowing that sometimes it feels taboo to say that or to own that, would you say that like that's a motivation that you share, in terms of wanting to be successful? I mean, also living in the Bay, living in a major city is expensive. Having a family is expensive. So like, it seems like there's a certain level of shame that we're supposed to feel for wanting to make money, but
Yeah.
also wanting to have a good lifestyle and be able to travel or have experiences, things like that is also a value. So,
Yeah.
speak on that a little. I'm curious, like on your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's hard to square living in a capitalist society, and in my profession that is there's a lot of money that goes into it, private money that goes into it, and taxpayer money that goes into it. I don't know if I'd say like for me if it's a motivator. It is something that like I know will help us get to places we want to go for
Yeah.
this household. So I think it's an important kind of piece of something that we find to be important. I don't know if I'd say like I wake up and it like motivates me like that, but it certainly like motivates me in terms of like, are we going to be okay, 5 to 10 years from now? And, in that
So you're
sense.
not like Linda Evangelista where it's 10K for you to get out of bed in the morning, but also some
No.
balance with, wanting to be able to not stress about money. I mean, there's no shame in that.
Yeah, that's the thing is I think I don't want to stress about money, and
Yeah.
nobody wants to stress about money. And so making, having having making a good salary, having more money is generally you don't have to stress about it. I think
Yeah.
there is a point to where, there's diminishing returns. If you're making, and I mean like excess, you just don't need a certain point. Personally, I feel like that, but like
Well,
there's
if you
also
want
a
to give
point
me your
to.
excess, just like let me know.
I haven't reached that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if I ever do.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't think it's bad to want to have money or to make more money. And I think as a
absolutely.
doctor, you are kind of pinged for that because of the things we just talked about, right? Like you're kind of, or not pinged, I mean dinged, sorry. You're kind of dinged for that because um, it, again, society thinks like, oh, well, you make a ton of money, um, way more than like the average person. So, why would you care about making more money? And it's kind of strange. It's like, if just because this is my profession, that doesn't mean that, and there are like some moral underpinnings for why became a doctor and continue to be a doctor, and would be a doctor, with a potato sack on a desert island. Um,
That's a
but
hot look. Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, totally. It would be like Dolce and Gabbana.
Yeah.
Um, um, but if if you talk to like I don't know, someone who works in like real estate and like they have a very robust portfolio and they're selling bigger and bigger houses and they're making more money, like nobody says anything to them about what they do. I think it's because in terms of like how much more money they're making, I think it's because with physicians there's this like, again, this kind of like you're like you are expected to solely care about the profession in terms of, again, providing care, improving people's lives, which is true, but you can have two things true at the same time, which is I want to do that, but I also think it's okay to have more money or to make more money,
Yeah, so
right?
it's
Like,
like they either want you to be like Mother Teresa or they want you to admit that you're like, name any like Jeff Bezos. I mean, like,
yeah,
yeah, so it's
yeah,
like you can't just
right.
be like in
Insert.
between.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know who they are. They
The
is
general they that wrote the Washington
sure.
Post
I
article.
think
Yeah.
I don't know if most people feel like that. I really don't. I think that
This is about
the
you. This isn't the episode featuring most people. This is the episode
yeah,
featuring Dr. Desmond Wilson.
right. No, but what I mean is like like the people who like this New York or the Washington Post article, this author wrote this piece, and that's internet culture, and that's a whole other conversation, which is like one opinion comes out and then there's a million opinions on top of that, but really, I don't know, maybe it's just this one guy. But I will tell you that in general, like there is, I feel like sometimes a tisk tisk, in terms of how much physicians make, wanting to make more, and how they make that money. All those things I think can sometimes be poo pooed upon.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's
that
not,
makes a lot
and
of sense.
sometimes it's by other doctors too, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
just the general populace, or it can be other physicians too who might look down upon you wanting to pursue something that is a little bit more cash positive, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think on that note too, like something that has been thematic. I mean, we've had some other, guests on the show who are in the health and medical space, wellness space, and they've sort of adamantly spoken against super bills, insurance, and that space. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk a little bit about like that model? And maybe that's kind of that churn and burn mentality of like, if you're
Mm-hmm.
at a more, kind of, I'll say like corporate model, and I don't know, maybe there's a better word for that in the medical space,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're at that type of practice, are they stacking patients like every 15 minutes? Everyone's like, oh, the doctor's late, got to wait forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're kind of rushed. They don't ask their questions or they don't get answers. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a sick cycle. So maybe talking about like insurance and like, are there positives to going into like private practice in that way or not taking insurance, concierge medicine? It's kind of a
Yeah.
newer thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I currently work in the concierge space. Um, and it's here's what I'll say about insurance companies, which is that they are reactive, not proactive.
Mm,
Um, so what that means is that generally the kind of care that they cover, it takes a very long time for the powers that be that run insurance companies to say, okay, this is worth covering. Okay. And so because of that, there are plenty of therapies, interventions, um, tools for evaluation that can be helpful for doctors, um, often are evidence based, meaning there are studies supporting um, uh, those those entities. Um, Yet insurance companies will not cover them, and so you're kind of you're put in a position as a physician, depending on where you work. If you're at a place that only takes insurance, where you have to say, or at least you might not say this out loud, but you have to grapple with, I know that this, I know that this test will help me in evaluating your problem, patient. However, I know that the insurance company will not cover it, and you would have to come out of pocket to pay for that. And that just doesn't feel good, right? It's
yeah.
almost like, a lot of times when you're practicing medicine, in any model, because even people who are in concierge care, like, even though, like, as their primary care doctor, like, they are the premium that they essentially pay for, or the membership that they join, is to have access to you as their doctor and to for your opinion, so on and so forth. Um, they still have to deal with insurance companies. So if you suggest an MRI for something, it's kind of like no skin off of your back, because no one's going to tell you not to order it, but their insurance company still might not cover it, if that makes sense. So anyways, so it's again, in that scenario where something might be helpful for a patient, and the patient wants some help for something, and the insurance company won't cover it, then it just kind of creates this, it's like that, that Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each
Yeah.
other.
I used that
It's like
this morning. Yes, totally.
It's that, right? But really, everybody's just be pointing at the insurance company. But that is what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so in an ideal world, like, insurance is a fantastic idea, right? Like,
Yeah.
insurance is there when you need it, whether it's for your own personal health, whether it's for your house, whether it's for your pet, whatever it might be. It's helpful, right? It's the issue is that a lot of times the people who are making the decisions about when it should work, don't necessarily have, like, boots on the ground,
Yeah.
or they just don't understand, some of the more nuanced aspects of delivering care to patients.
Yeah, definitely. It was interesting, even like when we were searching for an OB, in early on in my pregnancy, it was like we kind of explored the spectrum, me, I can't leave any stone unturned. So, the spectrum of doctors. And it was like one person was like this amazing reputation, and he had been practicing. I think he graduated medical school in like 1965, which is like legendary. Like, wow, bro, they didn't even have ultrasounds when you graduated. But
Wow,
like
all
going
right.
into the office, it was like stacks of paper everywhere. And it was like, it's like if Joe Biden was your OB. It was just like
Yeah,
very
sure.
stressful, lots of like non sequiturs. At one point, he was like, it's really important about the first trimester. And then he just like walked out of the room. Dan and I were like, what? Um,
Okay. Huh.
and then their office, the kicker was they were like, so we don't take insurance, but we'll give you super bills. And I was like, so what? I'm going to become like a medical project manager during my pregnancy. Like, absolutely
Yeah.
not. And
Yeah.
I thought that was
Isn't
like,
that awful?
it was awful. And it was like, that's not the
Hmm.
person I was going to go with anyways, because he told me that I was big. And I was like, well, now we're definitely not going to
Oh
be going
God.
with you as my doctor. He's like,
Yeah.
so you're big.
Great bedside manner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're big and you shouldn't gain more than like 15 pounds during your whole pregnancy because it's going to be really hard for you to lose the weight. And I was
Right.
like, sir?
And you know what? You're the guy that I want
Yeah.
to have the most intimate moment of my entire life with.
Totally. No, not at all. But, he walked in to do the
Yeah.
ultrasound and it was like Steph Curry on the court, he knew exactly what the fuck was up because it's like,
Yeah,
he's been doing
yeah.
this for 900 years. But it just wasn't worth it to me. Right.
Oh my
It was
God.
like,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
but
totally.
and and
Yep,
that's his line,
exactly.
and boom,
Boom, there you go. We've got a heartbeat. Look at this heartbeat. Yeah. It was a trip. And maybe that works for some people, but like for me, just like even imagining like the hell of like all of the insurance and all of the handling it myself, I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't have a portal and everything was like by mail, probably handwritten. I mean, God. And like, the doctor I ended up finding was like super modern, really amazing. A woman, which was like, I felt like it was helpful. She's like, I've had 5 kids. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
So like, you totally know what's up.
Sure.
And also had a portal, also had insurance, also had like all these things that made me feel like, okay, I don't have to do all this myself. And then also like, there's like a telehealth component, right? Like for like what felt like stupid questions, but they still matter. And I feel like, with the rise of like
there
telehealth,
are no stupid questions.
Okay, doc. Yeah. Let me try you now. With the rise of like, telehealth being really popular, I mean, especially during the pandemic, I'm sure that had to have changed the way that you practice, like you personally as a doctor, right? Like, I mean, I feel like everyone either got on board or had to retire. I don't know what the option was. Or they're that one doctor I just described that Steph Curry.
Right. Well, that they're going to have a, hopefully that guy's near retirement, but that will certainly fuel the fire of attrition for the clinic, because telehealth is, and when we say telehealth, we're talking about phone calls and video visits. It is, it became such the norm, and luckily, a large component of medicine was kind of telehealth driven already. Like where I was before my current practice, we certainly had a large component that was telehealth. But then it was a mushroom cloud of activity and visits using either of those modalities, and it is such the norm now. And there's really nothing wrong with that. There is a lot that you can accomplish over a video visit and a telephone call. Turns out, where having a healthcare provider at the other end who's still good at what they do is still important.
Yeah.
And I think that is so great because it allows for accessibility for patients, but also for me to access you, right? Like, if I want to, get you on the phone about something that is, I think, very pressing, then it's pretty easy for you to, click the link, get to the video visit, right? And now it's more cultural now. Like it's more a part of the norm. It doesn't feel that foreign.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very good feeling. Like you can have a very, mild medical situation, or you can have a really tough conversation about, like a terminal illness or something like that. But if that lends itself to, if telehealth lends itself to the ease at which you can talk to patients, then that's what's most important, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
just
not always
taking
easy
down the barriers, right? Like just
taking down the barriers,
yeah.
Totally. And also you can be in a place of comfort. You can be in your home and you don't have to worry about driving X amount of miles or hours, finding parking, finding the clinic, all that stuff takes a lot of time. People are busy. And so it's a nice way to kind of make things a little easier, actually.
Yeah.
It might not feel as personal, I think, at first for some people, and that's totally fair, for certain things. But I think, again, because it has become such a normal part of delivering care, it's it's that's okay.
Yeah.
And that also doesn't mean that we're done doing in-person visits by any means. I mean, I still see a large majority of my patients in person, at least once a year, but, sometimes much more frequent than that. But it's nice to have that as an option, and it doesn't feel foreign. And I personally don't think it feels that impersonal.
Yeah.
Especially if you've done it a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I know we joked earlier about patients sending you dick pics, but I'm guessing you probably get some, I'll say weird because I'm not a doctor, but probably some more intimate things sent to you that are uncomfortable. I mean, that's probably a big barrier of entry of why like having a protected portal matters. And it's not just like a random email from the Gmail coming through with like, what's this on my butt? Like,
yeah. 100%. And I think when you break down that barrier as the provider, again, with something that's intimate or personal, and, I'll have patients that come in and they want to, they need to talk to me about or show me something that, again, is in an area that is personal to them. I'll tell them, like, oh, we could have done this over video visit, in the comfort of your home. And sometimes it's just a matter of like kind of like dissolving that like wall of I don't know, like of
they're not
discomfort.
sexting with their doctor.
Right. Yeah, I think the idea that it's protected, like you said, that it's a portal, like that is super helpful. And at this point, again, a lot of patients know that, and they feel comfortable with that, but it does depend. I mean, some people, they're like, hey, I want you to see this mole. It's in a place that I don't feel very comfortable like talking, like showing you over the phone or whatever, and then they come in for the visit, and that's fine. And that's just who they are, and you just accept it,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and it's like, I think obviously there's like a level of, just trust and, maturity, like on your part of like, that maybe I don't possess. That's probably why I'm not a doctor. It's not the schooling. It's that I would giggle. No, but I mean, I think that is really important just to build that up. I mean, you've also mentioned, expressing a focus on, men's health specifically. And, there's the conversation of like every men's health article is like, do you have low T? Are you, is your testosterone levels dropping because you can get on this? And it's like, there's also, I've seen some of like the, things that you've shared just on your personal content about like why exercise can be really positive for things like that. And this is not soliciting medical advice on a podcast, but, kind of sharing out like, do you offer alternative solutions? It's not just like, here's a prescription for this thing, but how do you kind of balance that? Like patient requesting, I read this article and I want XYZ medicine to help with my testosterone. How do you sort of pivot their mind to an alternative solution or remedy? Do you do that? And also, I think, how do you sort of get people to stop reading, WebMD before they come in and they give you like the rundown of what it is that they saw on Facebook or whatever?
Got it. So I will answer kind of both questions with the same answer.
Great.
Yeah, there we go.
2 for 1.
2 for 1. So the most important thing that anybody can ever do is talk to their doctor. I know that sounds very generic, and that's what is in, if you read anything on WebMD, it's like, if you have this, talk to your doctor. But even before you get to WebMD, talk to your doctor. It doesn't mean that you should not be self-educated. It doesn't mean that you should have poor health literacy, but you are going to, medicine is, or just evaluating a patient, it's, there is art to it. And there's many components you have to take into consideration before you arrive at a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And even before you get to the diagnosis, you have a whole list of things you could be thinking about, and not just one thing, right? But you certainly think of things in terms of, in medical school, we always talk about zebras, right? So if you hear hooves coming, think of a horse. Don't think of a zebra, because at least in the United States, we see way more horses than zebras. So, definitely have the most common thing at number one, but also think of the rare thing. And the rare thing is usually the thing that people are the most concerned about.
Yeah.
And you talk through all of that, right? You have to. But so that's kind of what I would say. Just, talk to your physician, have a very honest conversation. In terms of like men's health and the culture of, I call it the T scare, the testosterone scare. I think that it is something I'm extremely passionate about in terms of just taking care of men as patients, as a group of patients, because I feel that we as a group, as a culture, think that men have it all figured out, that, society is built for them, it was built by them, thus, they're not going to fall through the cracks in terms of their health. And that's simply just not true. Men go to the doctor at a far lower rate than women. Men don't have a dedicated physician that they kind of see on an annual basis that focuses on things that are specific to them, like their counterparts, like people identify as female do. And so, yes, there are urologists who are, those are the people who take care of we call it the genitourinary system, as well as hormone imbalances in men. But people don't go to the urologist once a year. You kind of go to, it's kind of that reactive thing. Like typically men will go there when there's already a problem. And so I kind of want to reframe things where, yes, we're talking about your sexual health, we're talking about your cardiovascular health, we're talking about your mental health, we're talking about your social fitness as one whole uniting piece. And because you are a singular person and these things are all interconnected, and we should speak to it in that way. And so testosterone is interesting because testosterone is obviously a big part of a lot of what motivates men. In terms of, like, when I say motivate, I mean that it amplifies certain functions. Okay, whether that's sexual arousal, whether that is bone health, whether that is muscular strength and agility. But those things can also be affected by other things that are not just testosterone. So yeah, let's get your testosterone checked, but let's also talk about your sleep and how that could possibly be affecting maybe not just your testosterone, but some of those other things that you think might be linked to your testosterone.
So it's like a more holistic view of the health, instead of saying like, oh, I need to, because I even have like specialist fever where like I know who my dermatologist is, but my primary care, it's like who's available.
Totally. Yeah. No. And so like, and that's not uncommon. It's like, well, I want to see this specialist for this one thing, which is fine, but like looking at everything and determining, okay, what is, what are the the inputs and the outputs is so helpful before going down the path of going to a specialist. Because certainly seeing a specialist is great and it's important.
But they're just going to focus on their specialty.
They're going to focus on their specialty. They might not, and they are, I don't want to put, dermatologists in the hot seat. Like they're not, so myopic that they don't realize that, the human body is one vast, very complicated system. But that's when you go and see them, they are just probably going to focus on that one item, and they might say, oh, well, this could be the result of X, Y, and Z. Certainly that happens. And especially a doctor who's worth their salt, a specialist worth their salt. But I think if you start kind of further upstream and look at things more holistically, you might not even have to go to the specialist. And if you do have to go to the specialist, there's a good reason, because you checked, everything beforehand, and decided, okay, now it's time to do that.
Yeah. And I'm sure like it could probably be frustrating, I could imagine, for you as someone's primary physician. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, you went to this specialist? Like we haven't even covered like the early bases. You just called it a zebra. And who told you that? I mean, it sounds like, I'd love to, pivot to talk a little bit about like you wanting to start your own practice, probably for a lot of the reasons you just stated. Could you talk a little bit about the impetus for this and sort of, what led you to wanting to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So the clinic I'm starting, it's called Silo Health. So SILO. And the reason I named it Silo is because men are a silo. We are, very often a kind of singular entity that will not reach out to or will not connect with others.
Not asking for directions, or
not asking for directions. Right. We won't reach out to others for self-improvement. And so my clinic, what the focus is it's a men's health optimization clinic. So I'm kind of your quarterback, if you will, on your journey towards improved health. And we look at various aspects of your health. Some of them we talked about. So like sexual health, your cardiometabolic health, sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental health, and social fitness, which is arguably the most important of them. And, we have goals for you throughout the year, and it is a self-perpetuating model. So we will continue to get you to the places we want you to be on a granular level. So we're talking week by week, but on a larger level too, where we're talking more about longevity and your health span. So ideally, my patients who enroll in my clinic will, have those objectives in mind. Like they want to be kind of the best they can be and have somebody to help them get there. Because I think there's a lot of information out there, and to distill it all down to a place that is palatable, that is understandable, and that is, again, guided, I think is really important. Because you can read stuff all day long. You might have a person that you follow, like your guru, but they're not your doctor. And so if you tried to guide yourself through that process, it's kind of just like, again, it's like kind of WebMD to WebMD to WebMD, because there's nuances to your health. And so I think my goal is to be the person that will, again, kind of take you through that journey.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, and I think you kind of described it, but I mean, who's your ideal patient, in that scenario?
Yeah. So for me, the avatar that I've kind of created for this patient is somebody who is, well, there's multiple avatars, but, one of them is somebody who is kind of in the prime of their life. They do care about their health. They just don't necessarily have time to. And by prime of their life, I mean that they have the job that, they've always wanted, or they're working towards it. They're starting a family. They have a pretty good idea of who they are, and they want to make sure that, that their health is in check, because a lot of times that gets lost in the shuffle. And you might even have concerns about your health, but again, because as I said, men are a silo, you're not reaching out to anybody. And so that's one patient. Another patient I see, it's the person who knows all of this stuff. At least they have a pretty good understanding of a lot of the stuff related to, again, those kind of areas I talked about. but they don't have anybody to kind of take them through it or access
Mm.
to the things that they need to make sure that, you're being evaluated properly. Or they have a primary care doctor who they're stymied by, I can't order that for you because, it's not a part of our protocol, or I know it's not going to be covered by your insurance, things like that. So those are kind of like my two avatars.
So you're not a regular
But
doctor, you're a cool doctor. I think we're back to that. Yeah. I mean, and
yeah, cool
also
doctor.
maybe a doctor's doctor, sounds like somebody who knows a lot but still needs that level of care could also really benefit from seeing
Totally.
a doctor like you, because you're going to work with them through it and you're not going to bore them, but you're also going to say, yeah, we can get that for you. We can get that test done. We can do that thing. And you're not
Yeah.
going to be limited by, insurance or, protocol in that way.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Ideally it's again, it's a kind of a comprehensive model. And I have some interest already. I would love to talk to anybody that's interested in possibly joining the practice. I'm going to start seeing patients probably towards end of October, mid-November, and patients in California only at the
Okay,
moment.
so yeah, if you're in Massachusetts, sorry, but Dr. Wilson cannot see you even virtually.
Yeah.
So if somebody's interested in becoming a patient, let's put them on. How can they sign up to learn more? Are you interviewing patients? What's sort of the process?
It's the name of the clinic again. It's called Silo Health.
We'll definitely add it in the notes for the show too.
Awesome. So if you just go to www.silo-health.com, that's the website. There is an area where you just click and it says find out more, and then you just submit your information and we'll contact you. And there's essentially what I do is it's like a 30-minute or so conversation, just where we get to know each other. I describe the practice to you. And then from there, we kind of start the process.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, starting your own business is always an interesting task. Are there any brands or businesses that you look to that you're like, they're doing it right? Yes, that's inspiring. It doesn't have to be medical, but just curious to know.
Yeah. There's a pharmacy. So the model is not that novel because it's the same model as like Uber or DoorDash, but it's doing that, but with medication. And that pharmacy is Alto.
Oh, cool.
ALTO. We use them regularly, like in our household, but also as a physician, I will often recommend it for my patients. They're truly disruptors. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm not an investor in this.
Yeah, this is not sponsored.
I don't know anybody that works there or anything like that.
Same.
But they're just disruptive in that you don't need to go to the pharmacy to get your goods, which is like the best thing ever, because going to the pharmacy often is like the biggest headache ever, right? You get there, you're told your medication's ready, either your medication's not ready or your insurance hasn't covered it yet, or
there's someone sneezing on you, like
yeah, right, or it's just like there's a super long line, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It just can be a bit annoying. Not to say that you're not going to still have insurance issues, possibly, like in terms of coverage with also, just because. But guess what? You're not like waiting in line, or you don't have to drive somewhere, park, get to the pharmacy, then you find out that the medication that you want is not covered. Then you have to reverse that entire process and be upset.
Yeah. I mean, so you could do it from the comfort of your own home. They deliver it. And also, like, if you're feeling crummy, then that's like an even better thing. You could just be chilling on your couch and then have it show up. That's awesome. Yeah.
It's really great.
They should be giving you royalties too. We've got to make some calls after this. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, no, I use it. Again, I recommend it to my patients all the time. And you do pay like a marginal like delivery fee, but again, it's kind of like the same delivery fee you'd have for like DoorDash or something like that.
I mean, if you look at my
Crazy.
DoorDash account, there's definitely some embarrassing, like, overpaying that I've done where it's like, I just really need a sandwich and the delivery
Yes.
fee plus the service fee plus everything else. It's a $30 sandwich.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
But I need it.
You already clicked the button, man.
I'm already looking at it. I know what it would cost me, at least $30 of my time to drive there. Like, I'm getting the sandwich. That's amazing.
You're gonna get that sandwich. Yeah. So just like you're gonna get that sandwich, you're gonna get the, whatever medication you might need.
That's amazing.
So I like them a lot.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, where can people go to learn more about you? Should they pop onto silo-health.com? Are you on the internet anywhere? Can people kind of learn more about you?
I think silo-health.com is a good start. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I do have an Instagram page, which is at Dr. Des. It's a bit dormant at the moment, but I do offer some health advice there and might ramp things back up again. But at the moment, it's not my main source of, I guess, online presence.
Yeah, so not trying to be like a TikTok doctor. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And there's nothing wrong with being a TikTok doctor. I just, at least for me, that's not my objective right now. So I would say the website, LinkedIn, probably the two best places.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's been so wonderful chatting with you today. What's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
One final thought.
No pressure.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It is never too early to speak with your physician or whoever your healthcare provider might be about your general health. It doesn't matter how good you feel. It doesn't matter, what your objectives are at the moment. It's always a good idea just to get a once over, right? At least once a year, because things change that you just do not, that you just don't know about. And just having that peace of mind is extremely important. Yeah, I would say that. And then the other thing is building community. Make sure you have a good community. Again, I'll reemphasize the social fitness aspect of your overall health. And if you feel like you don't have a good community or good relationships, then reach out, and I'm happy to possibly chat about some interventions for you.
That's amazing. Words of the wise from Dr. Desmond Wilson. I really appreciate you being on the show today. And this has been another great episode of Don't Fuck This Up.
Don't fuck this up, guys.
Don't Fuck This Up is a podcast written, produced, and edited by Lauren Alvarez. New episodes dropping every Wednesday. Be sure to follow, rate, and review this and every episode. And until next week, please keep it together and try your best not to fuck this up.